For most of us, the COVID-19 pandemic, along with the current world events and the demands of juggling day-to-day responsibilities, all lead to increased levels of anxiety and stress. While we can't always control the circumstances, there are specific things we can do to help manage our stress levels. Joining us today on Newsmakers is Dr. Brandi Norman, Associate Director of Counseling Services at Kansas City University here in Joplin. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So talk about the mental health component that you all have at KCU.
At Kansas City University, we provide mental health services for all of the medical students that are located on both the Joplin campus and the Kansas City campus. The services that we provide are free. We are staffed by 3 psychologists in Kansas City, and we have one psychologist in Joplin and 2 master's level providers.
And that's because the stress from medical students is enormous, isn't it?
Yes. So when we look at medical students and the stress that they undergo, when they are first graduating from college, they perform better on mental health assessments than same age peers. And by the time they get to their second year of medical school, they have depression that has increased by 3-fold and anxiety that's twice as high as their same age peers.
Mm-hmm. And that's just because the intensity of medical school,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And so what is your body's natural response to stressors?
So the first thing that happens is our amygdala recognizes that there's a stressor, and then it sends signals to our body which activate the sympathetic nervous system. And during this process, the amygdala also sends information to the prefrontal cortex. And when it does that, the prefrontal cortex is responsible for our ability to think clearly, to plan, all executive functioning. And so when that happens, we have a reduced capacity to think clearly. The sympathetic nervous system then prepares the body to fight or flight. And in this case, you would have increased heart rate, sweating, digestion stops, and so on. So that's the stressors that the body undergoes.
And that's like a panic attack, right? Is that what your body exhibits?
An actual panic attack would be when our body miscues and thinks that there is intense danger, and then we begin to worry about the anxiety, and that causes a panic attack. So the sympathetic nervous system is our body's natural. If you are feeling stressed right now, that's what you're going to experience. So, of course, in prehistoric times, it was really important because if there was a saber-toothed tiger, we wouldn't know. We wouldn't have time to stop and think about it. So our body just naturally reacts.
And can anxiety and stress ever be useful, I guess, like in that situation?
So when we talk about stress in present day times, we often people just use the word stress in a general manner. And so it's perceived as all negative. However, there is a difference between distress and eustress. So distress would be when we are feeling anxiety and when we feel like our coping mechanisms aren't functioning or they're not working for us. And that can then on down the road lead to anxiety and depression. Eustress is perceived as something that gives us energy and we might be excited, and so it happens with positive events, and it also gives us focus.
I got it. And so how does the prolonged anxiety, how does that affect your overall health?
So individuals who have prolonged anxiety or under prolonged stress typically experience digestive problems. They might also have headaches or nausea. It can also lead to anxiety, depression, and heart problems.
Can it also lead to, when you said digestive, like ulcers, things like that?
Sure.
Does your body stress do that kind of thing? And it seems like everything mental turns into physical.
Yes.
Do you think that it's long overdue that people start using mental health and actual physical health together, in a combined?
And one of the lovely things about osteopathic medicine is that that differs it from MDs would be the fact that they consider the mind-body connection. And so, yes, of course, if you are struggling with mental health issues, you can easily have physical symptoms that go along with that as well.
It's all tied together.
It's all tied together.
And what are some of the practical steps? We hear a lot about diet and exercise. What can people do?
One of the things that I would recommend is to find something that you really, really love to increase resiliency and to engage in that activity as often as possible. So we want to, when we are experiencing joy and we are engaging in activities that we really love, we're building resiliency as we go. And yes.
And so, like, if somebody wants to do volunteer work, I've heard if you do something good for somebody else, it makes you feel better.
Yes. So one of the acronyms in dialectical behavioral therapy is ACCEPTS. And ACCEPTS talks about activities that individuals can do to help cope with distressing situations. You can do contributions, and contributions would be something along the lines of volunteering or doing things for other people that would be giving to others, because sometimes it's better to give than to get.
Oh,
So,
that's for sure.
yes.
That's what I like about Christmas. You know, giving. I don't care if I get a gift. I want to give something meaningful.
I'm the type of person that can't keep a secret when it comes to Christmas. So.
And what about sleep? How important? Because a lot of us can't sleep or have trouble sleeping.
That is also one of the side effects of stress and anxiety, is difficulty with sleep. And if we're struggling with that, then of course we have it creates a vulnerability. And I don't know about you, but if I haven't gotten enough rest, I can be irritable, which is also a symptom of anxiety. So stress can really play and affect sleep. It also interferes with, our appetite. Sometimes individuals who are experiencing a lot of stress do not eat healthy, and then other times they overeat. So sometimes because of cortisol, there's also weight gain.
That's a big thing for me is stress eating. And it's so hard to find an alternative to that.
Yes.
How important is it to get help when you feel something like that?
Oh, absolutely. I believe in preventative medicine. And so when we talk about preventative medicine, I think about preventative mental health. I think one of our goals at KCU is to decrease mental health stigma. Going to a provider such as a psychologist or a clinician should be as normal as going to the doctor if you have strep throat. And so when we think about anxiety and stress, if we can prevent the issue, that would be better than going in and like if you had a bad infection. So one of the ways that we know that stress is really interfering is when it morphs into depression and anxiety. And when that occurs, depression is hallmarked by feeling down or a lack of interest in activities that you previously enjoyed, a lack of motivation, hopelessness, helplessness, and sometimes suicidal ideation. And anxiety is hallmarked by irritability, muscle tension, difficulty with sleep, difficulty with attention concentration. And so if those issues come up and they have been going on, it's important to seek help because all of these things can be remediated.
And talk about some coping mechanisms that are unhealthy that people get into.
Right. And so some of the unhealthy coping mechanisms would be addictions. So if an individual is self-medicating with regard to alcohol, substance use, those things, while it may lead to short-term feel-good, at the end of the day, it can cause significant issues. And there are other addictions too. There can be food addictions. Some individuals cope with stress by avoidance, so anything that you're doing to avoid sitting with the emotions or being in the moment can be negative for your long-term health.
And do you think that people who do self-medicate, can that lead to alcoholism or addiction in full?
Absolutely. And I would say that if you have noticed that an individual is struggling with that, then the first thing is to just I like to ask people the question, just basically, I've noticed some changes in you and I'm curious as to how you've been. And maybe I've noticed that you've been drinking more than normal. And so is this something that I can assist you with getting help in?
And when do you think it's time to get help? Like sometimes people get winter blues or at certain times of the year. Are those people still as in need?
Absolutely. I think that if you have been struggling, if you notice that it's interfering with your interpersonal relationships, if it's interfering with sleep, appetite, and this has been going on for a couple of weeks, it's time to start seeking help.
And what about those who don't want to get the help? You know, I know somebody who does this and self-medicates and, you know, say I want to get them to get help, but they just, you know.
They're unwilling in the moment.
Yeah.
You know, I think an individual has to be willing. It's kind of the old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And therapy sessions are much like that. Psychologists can listen, and we can, you know, provide empathy and compassion and reflection. If we provide tools to make changes in a therapy session, then the individual who's attending counseling has to be able to do that outside of counseling.
And they have to be truthful with themselves as well as their therapist.
Yeah.
And is there anything that you want our viewers to know about mental health that we haven't discussed? Or
I think the most important thing to me that I am very passionate about is what I stated earlier, and that is that mental health stigma needs to be stopped. We have seen an increase in services across the pandemic, and so seeking services for mental health issues should just be as normal as going to a physician if you have an infection.
Well, thanks so much,
You're
Brandi.
welcome.
We really appreciate it.
You're
I want
welcome.
to thank Dr. Brandi Norman with KCU Joplin for joining us today. Coming up next, we talk to 2 Missouri Southern students who helped form the group Real About Wellbeing, or RAW as they call it. Stay with us.
You're not playing like usual. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Don't let this be the only conversation you have with the young people in your life. Learn how to have deeper, more connected conversations. Visit health.mo.gov/connect.
Welcome back. Joining us now is Haley Pyburn, co-president of RAW, along with Danielle Shore, secretary of the club. Thanks for joining us, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. So tell us what RAW is.
So Real About Wellbeing is a mental health club here on campus. We meet every other Tuesday and we talk about different subjects such as anxiety, coping skills, self-love, and other array of topics for college students.
And how was it formed? Why, I guess?
So I went to my advisor, Debbie Fort, and told her I want to start a mental health club here on campus. I feel like it's really needed, especially after COVID. And turns out my co-president a week before came to Debbie Fort with the same idea. And so she got us in contact with each other. We hit it off, and now here's Real About Wellbeing.
Yeah, I'm surprised there wasn't one already, because mental health and college kind of goes hand in hand.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's very needed.
And what is the core mission?
The core mission is to help reduce the stigma about mental health, to sort of like educate more people on mental wellness, and
Kind of like Dr. Norman said, that it should go hand in hand with your physical health, because it's all tied together.
Absolutely. And we actually talk about that in meetings, and how to recognize those symptoms within yourself, how to recognize when you're feeling anxious or having a trauma response, so you know how to handle those and cope with those effectively. Another mission of ours is to provide a safe space for students and to just open up the conversation of mental health.
Does it function sort of like group therapy, if you will, or is it?
I mean, kind of.
In a way, we don't have any professionals there, we're not claiming to be professionals.
Right. I just mean in a way of like opening up to your friends who are having similar experiences.
It's definitely good to be around people who at least somewhat understand what you're going through, and to be around people you know who won't judge you for having mental issues or just stress in general.
Yeah, I would call it more of like a support group for people who struggle with mental health. We always push like go seek individual therapy as well, but at the same time, individual therapy is so scary for some people, and it's stigmatized. It's not always accessible to people. And so we try to kind of provide this safe space. So it's kind of a gradual work towards maybe therapy or outside help.
And talk about the mental health issues, particularly for college students. What is it that stands out for you guys for stressors?
Anxiety is definitely a big one. Not only like financial, but you have social anxiety there, anxiety when it comes to tests and classes.
Absolutely. And like along with that, there's depression and kind of a mix of like problems with self-confidence, because I mean, if you're anxious and depressed all the time, that's going to lower your self-esteem. And so I see students coping with that negatively, or sometimes they'll even drop out based on their depression and lack of motivation and that kind of thing. And so we're kind of there to help that, or at least open the conversation of, okay, I struggle with this and I'm not the only one.
Right. And college is also the first time most students or kids are away from home. And so that support system that they would have had from their parents or siblings, it's not there. And you guys can kind of step in that role.
Right. We try to be kind of like a little close-knit family.
Yeah.
We do, like recently we did the parade.
We did.
Do you want to tell her about like getting ready for the parade and what that was like?
Oh, it was a lot of fun. We all came up for ideas. We took an extra meeting and we all like painted and made signs for it. You know, we met up at Debbie's house to pick out costumes, sort of figure out like as a group activity like what we were going to do the float. Like we had a general idea, but we were like, maybe we should do this.
Yeah, it was
a lot of fun.
It was very, it's cohesive bonding. It's planning together, being able to work together, hear each other out respectively, and also just having fun together and getting to know each other and joke around. And I mean, we played around in the costumes, and it was a lot of fun. And I feel like that brought us a lot closer than we were before with just
definitely.
the meetings.
And like Dr. Norman said, if you find, things or events or hobbies even that make you happy, that helps.
Absolutely. We try to talk about that some in our, and like when we do talk about coping skills, we talk about maybe using art as a coping skill or writing. Right. At least that's what helps me on my personal journey. And so I always push it and be like, you should try this or try to write without stopping for 5 minutes or stuff like that.
And are you a psychology major?
I am.
And how far along are you in your
I'm getting my degree in May.
Oh, wow.
So very close. I have like past experience in the mental health field. I really love it. It's a big passion of mine.
And will there be other students that come up and that continue on with this, that use one of this fabulous group that you started?
Well, Danielle is one of our officers who we plan to have help us go along. We also have a vice president, Alyssa Alexander, who we're hoping will kind of inherit and pass it along.
Right.
And we're hoping these students will not only like have this club go on, but also grow with this club. And yeah.
And do you have outside students who aren't maybe a member of the group? Can they seek your services, or
Absolutely.
What does that entail?
So we'll have on-campus events as well. Some of them we did a mental health panel. And so we had a professional come along with me, my co-president, and another member, and we all talked about our mental health journeys. We had open-ended questions. You did not have to be a member to come. We also did a planting event and the stigma, if you want to talk about that, with the planting.
Yeah, we had, it was for Mother's Day, wasn't it?
It was mental health week.
I know, wasn't it around Mother's? I know they were
Maybe.
talking about giving it. We were talking about giving. It's like, hey, you can give this to your mom on Mother's Day. But yeah, we were giving out like some wildflowers, some herbs that are known for the help with relaxation, such as lavender, if I remember correctly. And it was just sort of give people out. They had like multicolored little pots and things like that.
Yeah, that way we.
And that week, didn't we also do the trivia about myths about mental health?
Yeah, Yeah, and that was campus-wide as well. We gave out like a weighted blanket that was sponsored by Partners in Prevention. With the planting event, it was kind of to give you a coping mechanism of like, watch me achieve this and like make this plant grow, and just kind of giving you that little sense of purpose and something to work towards that's not stressful.
Oh, for sure. And what type of feedback have you received from the community, I guess?
A lot of pleasant surprise,
Good.
I would say. People, because there hasn't really been a mental health club on campus, and not a lot of people have ever heard about mental health clubs in general on campuses. So a lot of people hear about it and they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which, again, I think that's odd in this day and age that it wouldn't have already have been a thing.
Yeah, it shouldn't be shocking, but it almost, I know I was surprised when I heard about it.
Absolutely. And like, mental health is such a stigmatized thing that some students will even be like, oh, I'm not messing with that.
Sure.
Instead of opening that door and letting those emotions come in, and so you can grow and heal from things that maybe you've pressed down. When it comes to our feedback, a lot of students don't expect us to actually talk about mental health in our groups. They expect us to come in, talk about announcements, maybe chat a little bit and then leave. But no, we have a set topic we talk about every week. Some of the topics were like setting boundaries in healthy relationships, especially around the holidays, or like stigma, what mental health disorders are stigmatized, what we think of when we first hear about anxiety or depression or mood swings, whatever people are struggling with. Talking about those different subjects, and people are kind of taken aback because they're like, oh, I didn't expect it to be like a whole lesson or discussion where I'm talking about what I'm struggling with in my life, which we always encourage people to share what they're experiencing. We never, force them to.
Sure.
So hopefully that doesn't deter people away. But it's just, we really try to dive in deep on, okay, what are we struggling with as a group? What can we do to resolve that, or at least alleviate some of those symptoms?
Well, and, teen suicide is a big issue. And I feel like groups like yours, maybe that's the thing that they needed. Maybe to,
absolutely.
Stop.
I feel like
that
sometimes
direction.
that's what I needed, to have a sense of purpose in my life, and to have a sense of, look, I have achieved something. It's like, Raw is like, what, I don't know, like, it's a big dream of mine to be a mental health advocate and stuff like that. And so it's helped me with my depression and my anxiety and my the things I struggle with, to be able to be like, look, I'm actually making a change with something. And so even just being a leader in this has helped me personally. So I know some students have been helped on days like that where they may not have been feeling incredibly safe towards themselves.
Well, and raw, I mean, that says so much. Raw emotions, raw fear, raw anxiety. Is that how you kind of came up with the name, or how did that come about?
So Christine, my co-president, came up with a name. I absolutely love it. It's, real about well-being. So we are going to be raw. We're not, we're going to be honest. We're going to hold each other accountable as friends. We're going to talk about those hard to talk about subjects, whether it be suicide or self-harm or things like that. We're not going to skirt past those issues. We'll, keep our boundaries on what we talk about, so it's not triggering. We do give content warnings. And we don't, and if we suspect somebody is struggling with those type of things, we definitely lead them towards the right resources, because again, we're not mental health professionals. But it is so important to talk about, so important to spread our stories and be honest about how we're actually doing. Because I know sometimes you can attest to this, that there'll be times I come in and I'm like, I really didn't want to come today. I just felt so drained. But the moment I'm in there and talking with friends and that kind of thing, I'm like, okay, this is where I should be.
It's a very healthy and positive environment.
That's good.
That people there really support each other.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
It's very non-judgmental. And
that's always great.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about your emotions, is for people. Don't judge.
And I think sometimes it also helps with us being young people, talking to other young people about these issues, because if we're talking with a professional, I know some people feel like they're being talked down upon, or like they're like, you don't understand what I'm going through. How could you ever give me that advice? Well, we're kind of stepping in and filling the gaps when it comes to, oh, these are people who understand where I am, who are going to validate me, who are going to maybe even give me advice on how to get through it, who have actually been through it.
And you're so well spoken. It seems like this is a natural fit for you.
I love mental health. A big goal of mine is to be a mental health advocate and spread my story and talk about what's helped me in the past. And so, and like, to think that I struggled with anxiety before this, I wouldn't
be able to tell ever.
especially with speaking. I passed out one time during a speech. So to go from there to here where I am now shows my personal growth, and I mean, I'm gonna praise myself for that.
For sure.
And it just goes to show, like, the more you work on yourself, the more you handle your anxiety and learn to cope with it, the more you can grow and the better you can become, because I didn't think I would ever be here.
And do you warn other students against like self-medicating? Like I was talking with Dr. Norman before. A lot of times mental health issues can lead to alcoholism or drug addiction.
So we haven't had a lot of conversation about that, because that is a very serious topic that we don't want to spread misinformation about.
Oh, I gotcha.
So we do, if we have a student that we are afraid is using unhealthy coping mechanisms, we'd rather steer them towards a professional rather than overstep our boundaries when it comes to that.
Right.
But we do talk about replacing bad coping mechanisms with healthy coping mechanisms. So like that could be not only drug abuse and drinking, but it can be, I don't know, what are some...
Like eating, like Dr. Norman had said.
Either like the overeating or the lack of.
Yes.
Oh, for sure.
Yes. And like some coping mechanisms we would use to replace that. We have mindfulness or breathing or even social interaction. Pushing yourself to come to meetings on a hard day. I always like applaud my members for that, because I'm like, thank you for being here.
I've absolutely had days where, you know, I just felt really down and was like, I don't want to go anywhere, but I made myself go to Raw anyways. And I always leave Raw, you know, feeling better than when I went there. So.
And that's such a big goal. Like that makes me really happy to hear. But
Well, I really appreciate you guys. And, you know, it's such a great job.
I love it. It's we hope it carries on and will continue to grow the rate that it has.
Well, good. I want to thank Dr. Norman with Kansas City University Medical School here in Joplin, Haley Pyburn, and Danielle Shore from Raw for joining us today. October is National Depression and Mental Health Screening Month. Take care of yourself, and if you are ever in need of help, please reach out. This is Newsmakers on KGCS TV from the Ruth Copeland Studios here at Missouri Southern State University, and I'm Bobby Potroff. We'll see you again soon.